Welcome in, everybody. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my friend Max with two X's. You can find him on Twitter at BearsMax. You can find me on Twitter at Anthony_Rivardo. Today, we're focusing on the NFL draft, and in particular, we want to discuss the top five wide receivers in this year's class. I'm really excited about this year's wide receiver class. I think it's a generational crop of talent. You got talent stemming from the first round deep into those middle rounds, and a lot of players that I envision having a significant impact on whichever team drafts them in the upcoming 2024 NFL draft. So we're going to go through some honorable mentions, then go through our top fives, and also give some class superlatives on this group of players, and really just kind of break down some of these players that we're really excited about. But Max, before we dive into all that, how you feeling today, and kind of how are you feeling about this 2024 NFL draft class?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. This is all about depth. Last year, the biggest narrative was how crazy the draft class was in regards to just you can't really lose anywhere. And we've seen that translate onto the field this year with some incredible performances from rookies all across the NFL. And then we're blessed again to have back-to-back years, and we may even see another class like this in last year's down the line. So there's just a consistent pipeline of incredible talent at the wide receiver position that's just fortunately blessing us with incredible content and incredible performances. But the one thing that sticks out, and we were talking about this before the show, and everybody's kind of been talking about this, is just how tall and fast these guys are. These guys are ridiculous when it comes to just the tape, right? 6'1", 200 pounds, and 4.40s. That's like the average for this class. Uh, I don't know the last time we've seen a class like that. I don't know if there has been a class like that where you just have a bunch of just physical freaks out here that are just it's hard to like put it into words. Just how much talent, how much height, how much speed, how much strength is across the sport. So something's been in the milk for these kids growing up because they're just different. So exciting for sure.
Yeah, these guys are built different. I mean, there's so much size in this class. Like, if you want that perimeter X receiver in this draft class, you're going to find him. There's a lot of big kids in this group and a lot of freak athletes. And so that'll lead us right away into our first honorable mention that I want to discuss. Don't want to dive into him too much, but I just want to give a shout out to Brendan Rice out of USC, the son of Jerry Rice, Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest wide receiver of all time. This is another one of those physical freaks. He's 6'3", 210. And he was clocked in at 23.6 miles per hour. He's expected to run a 4.340. The guy can play. Like, it's not just he's going to get pushed up the draft board because he's Jerry Rice's son. I like what I've seen from him. He stood out on the film. I've delved into a lot of Caleb Williams film trying to study him, and Brendan Rice popped up quite a bit. He's got good routes. It's not excellent. It's not Jerry Rice level. I know he's going to get a lot of comparisons to his father, but he shouldn't. And one of his biggest weaknesses that he definitely needs to improve on at the next level, contested catches. A guy who's 6'3", 210, looks like he's got all the strength in the world, but he's only got a 25% contested catch rate this season. So definitely a room for improvement there. But he's got a good release, nice first step. He's a player that I'm pretty high on. And I think that in those middle rounds, I don't think he's going top two rounds, but you find him sitting there in the third or the fourth, and you need a player to kind of play that Z or that X for you. I think Brendan Rice can do that. Now, putting him in the slot, I'm not so sure. 88% of his career snaps have been out wide. But if you need kind of that big body athletic freak to develop good traits, that's Brendan Rice for you. And I think that he can make a pretty good impact at this league. And another honorable mention that I know we want to dive into that you're really excited about, Max, and so am I. I'm very high on this guy, but I know he's in your top five. So I'll let you get the first crack at talking about Xavier Worthy out of Texas, who I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I see shades of Tyreek Hill. I'm not comparing
Yeah,
him to Tyreek Hill, but I see the shades.
totally.
Elite speed, elite separation, good routes. Xavier Worthy's a player I'm really excited about, and I want to hear your thoughts on him.
Yeah, what's crazy is he's only like 20 years old too. Absolutely ridiculous. He's just speed personified, right? Like again, we've had a few guys. I think it was 2 years ago, Sky Moore out of Western Michigan, right? Was it 2 years ago? I don't remember at this point, but everyone was talking about the comps to him to Tyreek Hill because they're like, this guy's just super fast, right? His ability to shiftiness, he can just make anybody miss on the field at any given time. And of course, he ended up going to the Chiefs, and then they sent off Tyreek Hill, and I guess Sky Moore maybe didn't pan out to where we thought he would. But anyways, Xavier Worthy, I think, is a much better talent coming out of college than Sky Moore was. So I think more teams are going to, kind of emphasize if we need that pure speed, twitchy, you could play him out of the backfield if you want. He's not like a gadget guy. Like that's not what he's purely there for, because he has an ability to play out wide. He's 6'1" at the end of the day. He's still a big body. He weighs a little less compared to the rest of the guys in this class at 172 reported. But if you sit down and you watch his tape, he can play in the middle of the field the best as any of them. And that's where those shades of Tyreek come from. Because when you look at Tyreek, straight up, you're like, there's no way this guy can run these routes out wide. He's maybe a little too small. He should probably just sit in the slot all day. But you see Tyreek move all over the field. Xavier Worthy's the same way. You can really plug and play him in any system in the National Football League at any position, and I guarantee you he's going to make positive things happen. He's a little flying under a lot of people's radars. A lot of people don't know about him. He's been at Texas for 2 years now. I think he has a little bit of punt return history as well. I could be wrong, but he's always been that fast guy at Texas, right? There hasn't been a second where they haven't tried to utilize that speed. What's really interesting, though, is his stats kind of dipped this past year because they used him as more of a vertical stretch the field kind of threat, where I don't know if that's necessarily where he's best utilized, just because of his yards after catch ability with that twitchiness, with that speed. That's what he was used a little bit more 2 years ago, fresh into the system. Maybe it's because they didn't know his ability as well, but they just said, okay, like, we're going to get you the ball and you're going to make the rest happen. And then last year, or I guess this current season, it turned into, how do we get you the ball down the field so that we can score touchdowns? Because you're just going to flat out beat the secondary, right? If he can do both, not as much as the vertical deep threat, I guess, as well, but that could also translate to different issues within the offense. But if you're an NFL scout and you need speed, you need that deep ball threat, you need the ability to pick up yards after the catch, you need a guy that makes the secondary really, really nervous in the middle of the field, then Xavier Worthy is the guy that you're looking at to pick up. It just can't say enough good things about him.
Yeah, me neither. And to further some of your points, he's second in the Big 12 in yards after catch this season. So that's a big part of his game. He does return kicks and punts. He does it at a very high level as well. Makes people miss tackles, all that stuff. But one of the things that really sold me on him was watching his film against Alabama and the way that he was really cooking against Kool-Aid McKinstry. That's a first-round cornerback talent. That could be the first cornerback taken off the board in this upcoming NFL draft. And Xavier Worthy didn't back down. In fact, I think he got the better of him on many occasions in that game. So that was really the moment for me where I said Xavier Worthy is a stud. Like, I really saw it with him in that game. Now, again, doesn't have a great catch radius. He's kind of a little bit stocky, kind of stubby in some ways with his arm length, and not really too long, not reaching out there, plucking balls out of the air. With a lot of body catching, I think he could improve his hands quite a bit. Doesn't have a good contested catch rate, as I mentioned, only 26.3%. However, the separation is there. And for me, when I evaluate wide receivers, separation is king. It's paramount. I put it over everything else. And when you got that speed and separation combo, you can't beat it. He's got a great release package. He's killer with his first step off the line of scrimmage. Maybe the best in the class, arguably the best in the class. Maybe him versus one or two other guys that come to mind. But the way he played against Alabama, super impressive. And this is just a player that I am really high on. And I think that when we do get to the NFL scouting combine in March, I think Xavier Worthy is going to be a guy who rises up draft boards. His stock is going to go up around then because I think he can run a sub 4.3 second 40-yard dash. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if a team took a flyer on him at the end of the first round. There's a lot of first round talents in this draft class at the wide receiver position. So if I had to bet on it, Xavier Worthy probably goes in the second round. I got a second round grade on him personally. But if a team took a flyer on him in round one, Max, I wouldn't be upset by it. I wouldn't be mad at all. I think you can see the upside there. And when you look at modern NFL offenses and the way that they utilize those speed guys like a Tyreek Hill, who's got really good route running ability, I think a team's going to fall in love with Xavier Worthy, especially at the combine. And I think they're going to go ahead and take a flyer on him pretty early in this draft. But let's go ahead and dive into these top five rankings. Now, is Xavier Worthy number five for you so we can move on to my number five, or do you have him even higher up that list?
So I had him in at number 4, actually, just
Okay.
because I think speed kills in this league. I think the second round is honestly a little too low for him.
Yeah.
I like I don't know. It's hard in this league to find game breaking speed, and the teams that are consistently winning are those that have unlocked some sort of game winning speed, right? Like you look at, I mean, specifically, of course, we're going to have to talk about the Dolphins, but I mean, not only do you have Tyreek Hill, but you have Devin Achane, who's just as fast, pretty much, right? Like his ability to just run down the field. There he goes. No one can catch him, right? If anybody looking at that success, and sure, you know, they have a few losses. Who cares? They didn't go undefeated, whatever. Still going to probably go deep in the playoffs. You can mark me on that. They're going to look at speed. They're going to look at what are the Dolphins doing? And we need a guy just like that. And guess what? You can pick him up for really cheap rather than anyone else in the NFL. So I think he's probably going to go top 20. I really do.
Yeah, he's not getting that kind of buzz just yet, but I'm in the same boat as you. I think once we get to that NFL scouting combine, even the Senior Bowls, I know that they opened up the Senior Bowl
Right.
this year. You're going to see juniors there. Xavier Worthy's going to get a lot of buzz. He's going to do himself a lot of favors just showing off that speed at some of those events. But I'll dive into my number five guy. I'm curious to know where you have this guy on your list as well. But that's Xavier Legette. So we're going from one Xavier to the next. This is a product out of USCE, so South Carolina, the Gamecocks. 6'3", 227, projected sub 4.3s. Like we said, a lot of really athletic and freakish players in this draft class. And for me, Xavier Legette, we said Xavier Worthy, shades of Tyreek Hill. It's not even shades for me with Xavier Legette. It's like carbon copy replica of DK Metcalf. He's just got that physicality. Does he have the most expansive and well fleshed out route tree? Absolutely not. But he's got great hands. He's strong, really physical at the catch point, and is just a freakish athlete. Returned kicks, played in the SEC. Like this is a first round receiver to me. I think he's a really special talent. And again, this is just one of those guys with such so many traits that an NFL team is probably going to fall in love with. You look at his strength to speed combo and his route running ability. It's not the most polished thing in the world. Again, he doesn't run a full route tree, but what he does really well. And I think that was the argument for DK Metcalf coming out. Obviously, he fell in the draft. There were some weird, suspicious reasons behind that. But with DK Metcalf coming out, it was like, no, he doesn't have a full route tree, but what he does better than anybody else in the class. And if you had just asked him to do those things in the NFL, he's going to dominate. That's what the Seattle Seahawks built their offense around, having DK Metcalf do what he does best. And that's why he's been so successful. So Xavier Legette, if he falls to the right team takes him, builds an offense that maximizes his strength and potential, I really could see him being a strong WR1 in the NFL in pretty quick timing. I don't think it would take him more than a couple of seasons to really come onto the scene like that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. He's definitely my number five. You know, what's really fascinating is he's out of kind of a poor team in the SEC this year. The Gamecocks haven't been great for quite some time. And, you know, you have Spencer Rattler who's throwing him the ball, and, you know, there's some mixed things there. Pretty non competitive team, but he's still out there balling, right? Like he's the one of maybe like one or two studs at USC, South Carolina, for scouts to like sit and watch when they're looking at that tape. Across the board, you're close. I think you're close on DK Metcalf, but I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I saw a lot of Deebo Samuels and Xavier Legette, and I think any type of Shanahan style offense is going to be coveting a guy like this because of his ability to again play out of the backfield. Right. One thing that's really common with a lot of these guys in this class is you could plug them in the backfield if you really want to, because they're just so fast and they're bigger than your running backs. So there's just that going for them, number one. But then number two, he's great at high pointing the ball. He's great at just, he's got big, strong hands. He's really great at some of these contested catches. He's a great vertical deep ball threat if you want him to do that. So I mean, yeah, his game against University of Georgia, right? His toughest game of the year. He called 7 catches down for 71 yards. I have it right in front of me. His longest was for 35. So against elite competition at his team, which in his program, which is, you know, probably one of their lowest points in a long time, he's out there consistently performing, and he's averaging 17.7 yards per catch this year, which is pretty high. Pretty high. He's putting up He put up 1,200 yards this season, which is a good year in the NFL, right? And he's in the SEC, so it's not like he's playing down. He's playing up because he's at the bottom of that conference. So a lot of positives for him, not very many negatives, and that's why he's number 5 for me as well. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I like your evaluation of him there. We're not going to see eye to eye, I don't think, on the Debo Samuel versus DK Metcalf comparisons, but I think it's good that we have different pro comps there. They're pretty similar players in their own right, but I just love the physicality of Xavier Legette. I really see it. I
Yeah.
see how translatable his skill set is. We've seen guys like Xavier Worthy slash Tyreek Hill molds like really succeed in the NFL. We've seen DK Metcalf slash Debo Samuel molds really work out as well. So I think that what we're seeing with Xavier Legette and on his film, a lot of fans are going to watch him come draft day. They're going to fall in love with him. I think, especially when he gets to the combine, if he runs sub 4.3.
But I think beyond that, like just besides his speed, I think what's really going to be interesting, what's going to stand out, some of these guys is their verticals and their reps, like their bench
Sure.
press. I
Yep.
seriously think the strength metrics is going to be huge for some of these guys to distinguish themselves if they're going to be early first, mid second, right? Like because
Sure.
there's going to be a run somewhere in the late first, early second. I'm pretty sure, just because of the amount of talent there. Some they're obviously going to prioritize some other positions first, tackle, etc., in the early first. But then the second one or two teams starts going into that bag of wide receivers, then everybody's going to run. But I think it's going to come down to a lot of these guys are going to have similar 40s, so that's not going to be the biggest metric that we're looking at this year. It's going to be who jumped the highest, right? Who can get up there the highest? Who has the longest broad jump? It's going to be the strength measurables because especially as this league has been getting stronger, right? The guys like Xavier Legette, if he comes out and he puts up a ridiculous amount of like strength metrics, like the DK Metcalf, then you're probably going to see his stock rise a lot. But I think
Yeah.
that's just me. I think like those metrics are going to be really important
No,
in the
I
combine.
think that's a really good point. And for Xavier Legette, I think that's where he wins in the NFL scouting combine, the bench press. The guy is supremely strong. I think, especially having in my head that DK Metcalf comparison, I think he's going to put up a ton of reps. I think he's going to jump out the gym. And I think that's where he's really going to do himself a lot of favors with the draft stock. He's just going to be one of those guys that workout warrior, puts up crazy metrics across the board. Again, kind of like DK Metcalf, maybe his agility and his shuttles and his cones, maybe those aren't going to be all the way up there. But NFL teams are going to look back on that DK Metcalf draft and think, we overthought it with him. Let's not overthink it with Xavier Legette. Maybe he doesn't have the shuttle times, but we can build an offense around him anyway. And another player who's pretty similar to him, I'm going to jump up to my number 4 guy. I know your number 4 guy is Xavier Worthy, who we already discussed, but time to dive into my number 4 guy. Kind of similar to what you said about Xavier Legette. I think this is a player who jumps out the gym, has a crazy vertical, does himself a lot of favors at the combine. It's Keon Coleman out of FSU. Shout out to FSU. You can have the debate about whether or not they should have been in the playoffs. We won't have that in this episode. I will say shout out to Jordan Travis, Palm Beach Gardens, Benjamin Buccaneers product. Shout out to you, sir. But Keon Coleman, this is a player, and I'll throw some pro comps out there off rip that I have. Plaxico Burress. I'm a Giants fan, so I really saw that one immediately. But watching him a little bit further, studying Keon Coleman even more, Dez Bryant came to mind. And a lot of that had to
Wow.
do with the fact that Dez Bryant, early in his career with the Cowboys, a lot of punt returns, successful ones too. Keon Coleman at FSU, elite punt returner. This is a guy that, like, you expect him to be this size. You expect him to be contested catch, big body, great catch radius, do all those things, and he does those things well. But then when he gets the ball in his hands, those yards after the catch, that's what separates him. And I know his separation is a concern for some. It's not as much of a concern for me because I've seen some really good routes on his tape, and I've seen things where he does find ways to get open. He separates at the catch point for sure, but I think he runs a pretty decent route tree. Is it the fullest route tree like some of the other guys we're about to discuss? No, definitely not. But this is one of those freak athletes who's got a lot of upside. He's a former basketball player, was committed to Michigan State, and it shows up on nearly every single play. Like he's got that stop start ability, he's got that vertical jump. And again, I think that this is one of those moldable balls of clay. That's what NFL teams look for. Which big ball of clay can I mold into that freakish wide receiver? That's Keon Coleman for me. Really love his game, and I think that the way he played over in the ACC, 6'4", 216. He's just got all the traits that you want out of a first round wide receiver.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. He's not on my list. But I like Keon Coleman a lot. And the only reason he's not on the list is because he's a bit more raw, like you just mentioned.
Sure.
So there's some folks that's really exciting. Some front offices love that. Some coaching staffs love that because then you can make your own little wide receiver, right? You can make
Mm.
your own Des Bryant, maybe minus some of the locker room issues, and hope that works out for them. And what's really fun is when you sat down and you watched FSU this season, of course, you're going to look at Johnny Wilson because he's like the Victor Wembanyama of this class and just, the past couple of years at wide receiver. But then what really catches your eye is Keon Coleman, right? And his ability to just get that ball. It's kind of crazy. And it's funny that the number one negative for him is also a positive of his game is because he doesn't have that separation or lacks a little bit of separation in some of the deep balls that may be underthrown. We can have that conversation later. He's able to get up and get them still, right? Like he's in this conversation because he hauls those catches down. So what's great about Keon Coleman is his ability, right? Not only to punt return effectively, which is probably one of the better in this country right now in the draft, but as a Bears fan, I'm always trying to make comps back to Chicago, and I have to think about Devin Hester. Devin Hester, of course, was faster, was cornerback out of college. He wasn't even in the wide receiver position, but you're talking about balls of clay that are just really great athletes. That's what Chicago did. And eventually they decided, hey, what if we put this kid out wide and start lining him up? And every single year that Devin Hester was a wide receiver, he progressively got better as a route runner. So you give him reps, you give him ability to showcase why he's such a good athlete. And typically you get rewarded for that. So I think with Keon Coleman, the reason why I have him lower on my list is just simply because of that raw talent ability. I would like a much more package out of the box, ready to rip wide receiver. But that's also because I probably have a loser mindset with my team. So I want a guy that I can plug and play and start winning right away. If I'm a more established team with a more established wide receiver locker room and some guys to really teach along the way and a great coaching staff, then Keon Coleman's probably the first guy on my board because I know I can turn him into something that is going to be special. But for me, that's why he's off mine. But honorable mention for sure. He's great.
Sure. Yeah, and I really like what you said there. I think that the Devin Hester comparison is pretty cool because again, that ties into what I was saying, just a very moldable ball of clay. Like if you're an NFL GM that likes traits, that just wants athletes, guys that you can coach into something, you go Keon Coleman the same way that you went Devin Hester. But if you are looking for something a little bit sharper, a little bit more polished, I think that's probably going to lead into, I think we have the same number three guy, but I'm curious, who do you have number three on your list?
I've Rome.
So do I. Rome
Yeah.
Odunze, Washington. Guy's a freak. I think that when you look at what he does at all three levels of the field, he wins. He wins at all three levels. And I think that with the contested catch rate that he has, it's 68% 2023. If it's in his radius, which is huge, he has a huge radius, he's plucking it out of the thin air, strong hands, it's his. But then on top of that, you combine that with some really, really polished routes. This is a polished, ready to win now player. So, talking about kind of different styles, different flavors of wide receiver, what different GMs might like. Some of them like those traits, some of them like those guys that will win and win now, win at all three levels. That's Rome Odunze to me. Don't think he's the best after the catch. I think he's pretty minimal in that regard. Kind of one of those possession receivers, 6'3, 215. Not the freakiest athlete, but a good one. And I know that there's a lot of interesting pro comps out there, so I'll ask you that first. What is your pro comp for him? But really, just this is a player that I'm really excited about. Like, if it wasn't for the other two guys in this class, he could easily be a WR1 in a down year and would most likely be a WR2 if not for those guys above him. But, starting off with the pro comp and then, like, kind of how are you feeling about Odunze?
Yeah, when I think of pro comps for Rome and Dunze, I think of guys who are just really talented possession receivers. And I might be stealing your thunder, but I think currently in the NFL, you have to look at the Indianapolis Colts and a guy named Michael Pittman Jr. He's just kind of the best when it comes to thinking about possession receivers in the league right now. But another thing just randomly occurred to me the other day while watching him. I got some shades of Andre Johnson, and I don't know if that's entirely accurate, but you watch some of his game there, and I think there's something that's a little bit similar. Because what's really interesting about Rome is his metrics in regards to vertical and broad jump that he recorded over the last offseason, because I think he might have been prepping for to declare, are pretty impressive. And I just think that he has a little more athleticism to give. I think the position that he played in Washington was more of just that vertical deep ball guy. And you sit down, and one of his best games of the year was, weirdly enough, one of Michael Penix's worst games of the year, in the Apple Bowl with Washington State. And he didn't really have an ability to showcase that athleticism outside of getting some really contested balls and bringing him down and scoring. But I think there's a little something there, and I think if you put him in the right system, he can really show you just how athletic he can be. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you.
You're making some points that I really, really like because I did a little bit of a prospect breakdown on my Twitter about Rome Odunze, and I kind of went through all of his strengths. I gave him a glowing review, but at the end of it, I was like, okay, but here's one weakness that I see. I don't think his route tree is fully expanded just yet, and I think that his yards after the catch can be improved. And then I had some really strange guy tweet at me like 10 times in a row, quote tweet every single one of my tweets, and was just kind of like trying to rip me and say he runs the best routes in the class and he's got the best route tree. And I was like, you didn't read what I said properly. Because, like you just said, he can run all of the routes. He's got the ability to. He just wasn't asked to. I have like a little bit of a bone to pick with the way that he was used at Washington, kind of like how
Right.
you were mentioning, because there's more to this player here. So I think that'll be kind of the eye test might not pass for all of the NFL teams. Some of them might not see him as a top three receiver in this class because he doesn't have those Keon Coleman traits or the Xavier Worthy traits or Xavier Legette. But if you really study his film, you see that there was more to him than what he put out there at Washington. Like he's a Blitnikoff nominee, and he could be like I think did he win it or did it MHJ? I don't remember who won the award. I know it was announced recently, but he was a Blitnikoff nominee for a reason. He had a dominant season. Obviously, what they did over there in Washington worked, but they really did kind of put him in a box and say you're a vertical contested catch threat, and I didn't like that because like you said, my pro comp for him is Michael Pittman. This is a guy that wins at all three levels. They should have asked him to do more at those first two levels, and they'd asked him to do it that final third, in my opinion. And I think that an NFL team, a good one that drafts him, is going to recognize that and then use him in that Michael Pittman role, have him use his great route running, expand his route tree all the way. And I think the ceiling, there is no ceiling on this guy. The sky is the limit for Rome Odunze. Again, maybe not the most athletic and freakish of an athlete here, but a really polished route runner, great release package, and just does a lot of things really, really well. I've seen some fans compare him to Davante Adams. I didn't want to go that far because Davante Adams is like the crispiest route runner. He's very elite. I see some shades of it in a way because he's got a really good route running tree and release package. But in terms of running every single route in the book, that's Davante Adams. You didn't see that necessarily on the tape for Rome Odunze. But again, the shades, the flashes are there. So I don't hate that comp, but I think the Michael Pittman one, where he is just a good route runner at all three levels, I think Odunze is a little bit more athletic. But again, just I think he's going to be an elite possession receiver in the NFL. He projects really well as being one of those top X receivers, and just having some really, really solid polish to his game as soon as his rookie season.
Yeah, he's kind of like a sports car, in that sense. Like you buy him off the lot, and either you know how to drive it or you don't, but it's ready to go. It's ready to rip. Yeah, I mean, he's fun to watch. I don't know if I agree with the Devontae Adams pick, really. So, but regardless, I just looked up who won the Blitnikoff, and of course, we obviously should have known it was Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yes.
But I guess our my number two is really mad about it, and probably your number two as well.
Yep.
And super salty about it because everyone likes to complain these days. And no shade to LSU fans, because LSU fans are kind of crazy when it comes to this stuff. So yeah, I mean, like, do you think? I mean, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. deserved to win the Blitnikoff, right? I mean, like, hands down, he's the best wide receiver in the country, right?
I don't know. I think when you look at how much they contributed to wins and how their statistics ended up shaping out at the end of the year, honestly, I probably would have went Odunze. I thought that what he did over in Washington, he was pretty historic. And if you're taking a look at just who performed the best statistically and contributed to wins the most this season, I would go Odunze. I thought that he should have won the award. Again, I mean, we're gonna dive into MHJ. I mean, that's everybody's number one consensus guy on the board. So we'll get into him in a little bit, but I thought Odunze deserved the award. I thought the way he played this season with Michael Penix and over Washington, just for me, he contributed a lot more to wins and to college football playoff
Sure.
team than MHJ in some regards. But let's talk about the number two guy that you hinted at. That's Malik Nabers out of LSU. Now, if we're doing more of the pro comps, DJ Moore, I know that you love that one. Chicago Bears fan. I know as a Chicago Bears fan, you're eyeing DJ or Malik Nabers. This is a player that could be in play with one of those two top five picks that you're likely to have. Elite route runner, separator. When I was talking earlier and I was saying I like those guys that separate, I'm really talking about a guy like Malik Nabers who just finds ways to get open with great route running, great release package, and my favorite thing, just a high football IQ. Running routes against these zone coverages, finding those little pockets to slip into behind the defense and getting open and then attacking the ball. Like Malik Nabers, he's the full package, complete package for me at the wide receiver position. And I have to imagine you're feeling the same way.
Yeah, I can't say enough about this guy. I mean, if we're going off of that ranking or criteria for Bolitnikov, then yeah, this would be my number one wide receiver in the country. Pulled down 1,500 yards this year and 14 touchdowns, and he still's got another game to go. So I don't know if he's going to play or not. I don't know if that's been announced yet, but the thing that just flashes out to me is, I mean, he's only 6 feet tall and he's only 195 pounds, which in this class isn't anything to write home about. And his 440 isn't going to blow you away, it really won't. But man, this is like the smartest wide receiver in the draft. It unbelievable. There's you sit down and you just watch him, and a lot of what makes DJ Moore so great is his ability to just find a place to be open to catch the ball, right? Is help the quarterback, help you get more yards. And I think DJ Moore leads the NFL in unrealized air yards, which is kind of a silly stat, but essentially it just means that if he were able to catch the balls that he was passed, I mean, it's kind of a thing of, maybe a statement on Justin Fields, whatever. But he has potentially 2,000 yards. He's like 1,900 unrealized air yards this season. And that just speaks to his ability to be open, right? And that's the number one luxury of the NFL. We could talk all day about how fast you are, about how strong you are, but if you can't beat a coverage, doesn't matter. This guy, Malik Nabers, just knows how to beat coverages. He'll sit in any pocket, in any zone. I think it was the Alabama game where it just really stood out. It's just his ability to just sit. Like, and
Yeah.
and what's really cool is I said this because Jaden Daniels looks a lot like Justin Fields right now. He really does to me. Uh, Similar base, similar kind of inconsistency, similar arm talent. Like there's just a lot there that looks the same to me. So when I see plays at LSU break down, they did a lot, and it just turns into pitch and catch and backyard football. It looks like Justin Fields and DJ Moore to me, and that's where it's like, okay, right, like this could work. This guy could work. Malik Nabers would be great for the Bears, putting on my literal hat. But he'd be great in any system. Seriously, I think he's just such a shifty guy. And to the credit of Jaden Daniels, who both of them had breakout years, Malik Nabers wasn't supposed to be the number one wide receiver at LSU this season. He wasn't supposed to be number two, number three on the big boards this year. He really put his mark out there, and so did Jaden Daniels. I mean, he was supposed to win the Heisman, so that's where we're at. But yeah, really impressive stuff.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that Alabama game. There's that one play in particular. I want to say he was running a backside dig and there was a safety, and like a quarterback, he read that middle of the field safety, got
Yep.
behind him and created separation and gave Jaden Daniels a window to throw the ball into. And then even that, it was a tight window. and the safety looked like he was about to undercut it. DJ Moore, or sorry, not DJ Moore. We keep the comparison. Malik Nabers, like DJ Moore would, fought back to the ball, beat the safety to the spot, pulls it in. And I was like, that right there fully encompasses everything that you want from your wide receiver. You're talking about good route running, good IQ, good separation, and then physicality to rip the ball away at the catch point. Like he did it all on that play, and he does it a lot. All across his film, you see it. Vertical, underneath. Malik Nabers in a normal class is an easy pick for WR1. But you
Yeah.
got MHJ in this class, so we should dive into. It's like the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that MHJ is going to be your WR1. He is for everybody, and it's for good reason. So we'll dive into that. Last thing that I'll say on Malik Nabers, I do want to point out that like watching his route tree, I love his 8 yard curl routes. Like this guy
Yeah.
just on the outside of the field, that's his bread and butter, his signature. Run 8 to 10 yards, stop, cut on a dime. You see guys fall over when he stops. It's like you know it's coming, but you just can't stop it. So you're talking about this guy playing in the slot, Z, X, like wherever, and that's another thing that I had to shout out on Malik Nabers. But let's talk about Marvin Harrison because he's getting that generational tag. A lot of people are referring to him as a generational wide receiver. I see it. I understand it. He's 6'4". He's 205 pounds. His pro comp, lazy for you. It's going to be a Marvin Harrison Sr. It's not a good pro comp. They're completely different players. It irks me when people make that comparison. This is a guy that plays like an AJ Green. This is
Yeah.
a big physical guy who also has great route runners. Love MHJ, love his play. Love the way that he played for OSU for several seasons. And not only is he one of those big vertical threat guys who's physical, he does it all on the route tree. Like he runs everything. He's a good route runner. His hands are a little bit of a concern. I want to say he had 6 drops this season, so some concentration drops on his film as you comb through it. But really, other than that, you struggle to find those weaknesses in his game. He's just a really fully built, completely fleshed out wide receiver with an impressive skill set and just endless strength. So, what separates him for you? Like, do you give him that generational tag? Are you up there at that level, like saying, oh, this is a generational wide receiver? Or are you just saying he's the easy number one in this class because of everything that he's done, all the traits that he has, but maybe not so generational? I'm curious to know where you stand on that one.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm gonna apply the generational tag. I don't think that there's a single guy in this class that's like going to be the antithesis of this generation, right? And I only say that because we just had an incredible class last year with guys who are balling out. So, Marvin Harrison Jr. Will have a great career. I have no doubt about it. But I don't think he's going to be like the diamond in the rough, right? I don't think he's going to be like the next Megatron, where like he's just the one guy that everybody looks to and say that's the best wide receiver in the league, right? So I don't know. Like I think maybe this is like a bigger philosophical argument that we need to stop applying this tag on
Yes.
like
I hate it. I hate
prospects.
it. I'm like mad at myself for bringing it up. I hate the generational
No,
tag.
but
I'm
like
mad that I
it's
brought
a
up, but
it's
it's
fine. It
worth
was a
bringing up. Yeah,
question, right? Like I get it. It is what it is. And a lot of people are doing that because it gets, it's a part of the content machine. But
sure.
he's really good, and he's been really good, and he's been number one on people's boards for the longest time, since last year. So it's totally warranted. I know folks that are drafting top five, they're all on their board, because I said Rome is a sports car, right? Like, there's it's gonna drive fast. It just depends on how you drive it. You may not know how to drive it. Marvin Harrison Jr. is like a really nice Ford Focus that you're gonna like, how to drive. It gets you to point A to point B. It's efficient, right? Like that's kind of what you want. You kind of want a
Yeah.
guy, especially if you're a top five draft pick, you kind of want that guy that you could just put in the locker room, put him on the field, plays hard out. And that's the one thing that's really, really impressive about Marvin Harrison is a lot of these guys that we've seen that are projected to go top five are kind of really cocky with it. And it gets to their head. And even before the season's over, they start saying stupid stuff, or they start letting their performance slip up a little because they're just like, yeah, I'm going to end up top five anyways. Um, Not Marvin Harrison Jr. And what's disappointing is his team unfortunately fell apart at the end of the year, and it is what it is. That loss to Michigan was cataclysmic, but his love for his program, how much his time at OSU meant, his love for the game, how much of a silent leader he is for that locker room and for himself. He's an incredible, credible young man. And I think any team looks at that and he's a complete package of off the field, on the field, in the locker room, at the training facility. He just brings it all in. And he won't be the fastest, right? He won't be the strongest. He won't be the tallest. But when you look at a 5 points chart of everything put together, he's just at like the perfect spot for everything. So he's the Goldilocks of wide receivers in this draft, where it just everything is just right. And yeah, I disagree with generational tags. Disagree with saying he's going to be have a career as good as his father. You know,
Yeah,
it depends on who's throwing him the ball. So
sure.
that's also a big thing that helped his dad.
Situation is everything for most
Yeah,
draft prospects,
right.
receiver, quarterback, offensive line, it's everything. But I think one of the things you said there, kind of like those car comparisons, the analogies there, he's kind of like a Tesla. He drives himself. Like
Sure. Right.
you don't have to worry about this guy. Like you
Although
know
maybe we
what
do
you're
with the
getting.
recall.
Sure. And that is another thing I want to say is you were mentioning his passion for his program. And I'm like, how passionate is he? Is he skipping out on this top five money? Or is he going for the NIL deal?
Right.
He's yet to declare, and it's kind of shocking. A lot of the expectation was he would have been declared by now. I think that's the case for quite a few of these prospects. Caleb Williams being another one. I don't think he's playing his bowl game though, so I think it's all but confirmed with Caleb. But Marvin Harrison Jr., there's a lot of buzz that maybe he returns and he takes that NIL money instead of the first round pick money. My opinion, I think while you're still considered to be this generational can't miss guy, you
Yeah.
take it and you run with it and you declare. But this could be a really decisive winter for college football and the history of it. Like this could be landscape shaping in terms of what some of these key prospects decide to do here, returning versus. We could probably have a whole episode discussing this and
Totally.
dive into it another time. But I think the way NIL is changing college football and changing the NFL in some ways is really,
Hmm.
really, really intriguing. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about Marvin Harrison. You're talking about contested catches, he's got it. Talking about the catch radius, he's got it. The speed is there. The routes are there. Maybe the yards after the catch, not as much there. The hands still a little bit inconsistent, but other than that, I mean, this guy, he's got it all. He's an ex receiver. He's 6'4", like I said, and he just runs good routes. He's shifty. He's powerful. He's everything you want in a wide receiver, and he's been proving it for years. So whoever lands him at the top of that draft, I mean, if he declares, whoever lands him in the top 3 to 5 picks, I think that they're getting themselves a home run pick. Obviously, quarterbacks are going to go off the board early, and I think probably 1 and 2. But that number 3 spot, if it's not Marvin Harrison Jr. or another quarterback, it's going to blow me away if somebody takes a lineman or anything else there. But before we wrap up, let's go rapid fire on a few superlatives. I want to kind of go through these best contested catch guy in your mind. I think I kind of hinted at mine earlier. I'm going to go Odunze. I think just the way he plucks it out of the air and the way he uses his size, that's the guy for me. But how about you? Best contested catch guy?
Yeah, I'd say that. Or also, I really do like Keon Coleman, but I think Rome just has the best ability to high point those balls, and it's kind of gross the way he does it.
Agreed. How about fastest? I think we're in the agreement there.
Yeah, it's Xavier Worthy. So
Yeah, Xavier Worthy. Speed there. Um, let's go with let's go with most overrated. You got anybody for that one?
yeah, I think there's actually a few. I'm kind of a hater at Johnny Wilson. I really am.
Fair enough.
I I I could dive into it, but basically, I don't know if that's going to translate super well. You know, I think he's great, but I'm just always nervous about a 6'7" guy who relies on how wide his feet are to beat 19-year-olds in the professional football league. So
Yep, I struggle to see it with the 6'7" guy as well. We've seen teams try it, and eventually those guys just get turned into tight ends, and then eventually they get turned into practice squad players. So I do struggle to see it. However, sometimes it works out. Darren Waller is a good example. 6'6" wide receiver entering the NFL. He's a tight end now. So It's not outside of the realm of possibility, and there's definitely traits to like about Johnny Wilson. But my most overrated guy, I'm going to go ahead and say it's the other OSU receiver. I don't see it with Emeka Egbuka. Like, I just don't see it. I don't like his route tree. I don't like his contested catch ability. I think it's really poor. He never even gets target on those contested catches. They don't even go his way. And to me, that means he's not separating enough. He's not getting open enough. Either you could say, you could argue he's separating too much and, everything is just wide open for him, or he's a product of a system. Maybe I got to dive into it more, whatever it is. But for me, I just don't see it. I don't trust him to make tough catches. And also his route tree is completely limited because you can't line him up out wide. He's purely a slot guy. So maybe if you're looking at this draft class and saying there's not enough slot guys, maybe that's why you like him because you want a pure slot guy. But for me, I like some versatility. I like a guy who can kind of be flexible in his alignment, and I like a guy that you can depend on. So while yes, Emeka Egbuka is dependable in the fact that he catches pretty much everything his way, I don't think that he's dependable on anything that's not wide open right in front of him. So I don't trust him, and I'm much lower on him than I am on a lot of these other receivers.
Yeah.
And I'll say, let's do the next one. Let's go best hands. I'm gonna go AD Mitchell, another guy that I'm not very high on. I know he's in the top five for a lot of people. He's not for me. He easily could have been on my most overrated. Went with Egbuka instead, but AD Mitchell, I'm pretty sure that you're a bit higher on him than I am, but he's only got one drop this season, plucks everything out of the air. He's got soft hands. He's a really reliable receiver in that regard, but not I'm not too crazy about him, but I think that you like him, so I'll give you a chance to kind of give him his flowers here.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a thing is you have these fun combos of just really fast guy and a really tall, strong guy, right? I mean, that's what you see in the NFL. That's what teams are trying to do. The Philadelphia Eagles have done incredibly well with Devontae Smith and AJ Green, So, I mean, you have a lot of programs that are following that mold, and that's how you win football games. Adonai Mitchell is just a tall guy. Sure, he's a little undersized for his height. He's kind of got a Devontae
Yeah.
Smith build to him. And he's not going to pull a 4.40. I highly doubt it. He has some injury concerns, but he was at Georgia. He's got some real raw talent to his skill set, and he just needs some time to bake. But I think you're going to see some teams in the first round potentially take a shot at AD Mitchell. I really do, just because of height, size, ability, the hands, right? Ability to catch
The
that
hands,
ball
yep.
and not drop it. And yeah, I think Combine is going to make some noise, and he's probably going to rise a little bit higher than Xavier Worthy will. Just Xavier Worthy is going to have height because of his speed and everything, but I think you're going to have some scouts that look at AD Mitchell and go, maybe this guy is the guy we should take out of Texas.
Yeah, I don't see it, man. Like I don't see it with the first round billing. Like I know that there's a lot of guys out there who feel that way, and you kind of hinted that maybe you could see NFL teams falling in love with him in that way, but I just don't see the game speed. Like even if he runs fast, I don't see breakaway. Like sure, he runs good routes, he separates, but he doesn't separate and then break away from me. And I think that's reflected in his yards after catch per reception in
Yeah,
his career, which is at 2.8, which I think is
yeah,
among the lowest in this class. He just doesn't have that breakaway speed for me. So love his routes, good hands, like a really good route runner. And I know I mentioned earlier, I love separation, love good route runners, they're paramount, but what's the good routes if you can't have that breakaway speed to get out of those routes? So for AD Mitchell, I just personally don't see it. But last one that I'll do for the superlatives, I want to throw out their best deep threat. And I know you're probably going to throw out Xavier Worthy on this one again because of the speed, but okay, you don't. So I'm curious to know who you got because I also have somebody different.
Brian Thomas.
Okay.
Brian Thomas at LSU. Um, this guy has drastically just skyrocketed up the boards, and it has to do entirely with Jaden Daniels' success. When he's looking for a home run ball, he's looking exactly at Brian Thomas. And what makes him so great as a deep ball threat is his speed, his straight line speed is great. He outruns these backers, and his wingspan has to be unbelievable. I can't wait to see his metrics at the combine because the way that Jaden Daniels just lobs that ball up there, he just literally, if you watch these tapes, it's like, screw it. He's down there somewhere. He's going to catch it, right? And he does. He's always extending to make the play. Almost every single time, it's a back shoulder fade, boom. If it's not in the breadbasket, I got to reach out and get it. And he makes those plays. So, I mean, that's a guy that I want as a vertical deep ball threat is he doesn't turn around. He doesn't have to turn around and jump up and high point it because it's in front of him. He just runs and he go gets it. So, and I think he's a really impressive wide receiver. And I think LSU has two studs that could go pretty early. I really do.
Yeah, I got to dive into a little bit more Brian Thomas Jr. I think that the points you make, they're great. Like I've definitely watched a lot of Jaden Daniels, and so from that I've seen a good amount of Brian Thomas Jr. And I love how Daniels just trusts him to go up there and get it,
Sure. Yeah.
trusts him downfield. I'm gonna go with a different one for my best deep threat in this class. It's gonna be Troy Franklin out of Oregon. Now, Bo Nix, not the strongest arm, doesn't necessarily hit him on all those deep balls unless it's really manufactured into the system. That's kind of I threw a little too much shade there, Bo Nix, but we could dive into that into another episode.
For
But
sure.
Troy Franklin, crazy speed. He's a little undersized. He's 6'3". I like the height, but 187. That's a little bit concerning. So how's he going to hold up at the NFL level? I'm not so sure. But he's got a reported 4.340. And also he just flat out flies and finds everything. The ball is up there and he goes and finds it. And one of my favorite traits that he has is his release package. And I think there's a lot of guys who win at the catch point deep, right? There's a lot of guys who win downfield. He wins early, which sets him up deep. So sure, if you're facing a lot of quarters coverage, maybe it doesn't help you too much. Or if you're facing, those two high safeties and you've got a guy playing a half, maybe you're not going to hit on every home run to Troy Franklin. But if you can find ways to scheme him up a one-on-one against a corner, if you've got to cover zero there, he's going to win off the line of scrimmage and you can just loft it up there. He's fast enough to go run under it and get it. And we saw that a lot at Oregon. I think at the next level, you're going to see that a lot for Troy Franklin. So he's a player that I could see going in the first round as well. I think that there are some. The boards are really shifted right now, like on
Yeah.
these wide receiver rankings. There's a
Every
lot of
day.
guys that, yeah, it's changing constantly. So I could see a team again falling in love with a player like this, taking a chance on him at the end of the first round. But ultimately, I think he goes in those middle rounds. I think he gets
Mhm.
slept on, but he has a ton of speed, and I really like the way that he separates early to win later in the routes. So that's my take on Troy Franklin out of Oregon. But this was a good breakdown. This was a good discussion. I think a lot of wide receiver prospects that we ran through here. I think we got through at least 10 of them. And I'm looking forward to doing more draft discussions with you, Max. I'm curious what position we should do next. I think got to talk about some of these quarterbacks pretty soon. We hinted at a few of them, so I think that might be where we go next.
Yeah, we can always talk about quarterbacks. It's like super cliche. I mean, I'm always a big fan of the tight ends. I think there's a few tight ends in this draft
Nice.
that are really gonna shock some people. I think there's some great tackles in this draft as well. I think we're
Yep.
kind of thin at the edge rusher and running back spot. I think the running back class might be the thinnest I've ever
Yep.
seen.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess we can always do whatever anybody wants us to talk about. So, but I
Sure.
personally,
For
for
sure.
me, I'm always a big fan of talking about the trenches and the big guys up front. And I always include tight ends in those because those are some of the biggest guys on the field. So,
Oh yeah, I like talking trenches too. We'll definitely dive into those. I'll have to brush up on my tight end knowledge a little bit so I can match you, and then we'll dive into that class. Maybe we'll do that one next. That could be pretty fun. Talk about some of those inline guys. But great episode. I had a lot of fun here. Anybody listening want to hear your thoughts on all these prospects that we mentioned? What's your rankings? Drop them below. Who are your superlatives? Who's your fastest? Your most overrated? Want to hear
most
all that stuff.
underrated.
Most underrated too. I want to hear that. For me, it's Xavier Worthy. I just think he's not getting enough buzz. But yeah, I mean, want to hear your thoughts down below. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, which all of you should be because it's our first episode. But stay tuned because we got plenty more good stuff coming. Talking about the NFL draft, the NFL, everything in between. It's going to be a lot of fun. So come join us on this ride. But we'll catch you all on the next one. And thanks for joining us.